Susan Speakman is back. Was Heinlein wrong, given his quote below and his insistence that all the starry-eyed idealists are all male? I could argue that these days the woman is the ones who are genocidal. What say you? Here's the quote. All societies are based on rules to protect pregnant women and young children. All else is surplusage, excrescence, adornment, luxury, or folly, which can and must be dumped in emergency to preserve this prime function. As racial survival is the only universal morality, no other basic is possible. Attempts to formulate a perfect society on any foundation other than women and children first is not only witless, it is automatically genocidal. Nevertheless, starry-eyed idealists, all of them male, have tried endlessly and no doubt will keep on trying. Boy, you want to talk about a topical question. I was checking out Instapundit this morning and I saw an article and it said, it had to do with the Las Vegas event. And it says, just another case of male privilege. And you go to the story, and it's a story of a woman who was there in the crowd. I think she'd been a waitress or actually worked at the Mandalay. And she was out there at the crowd, and when the firing started, these two guys basically threw themselves on top of her to protect her. And one of them got up and walked away, and the other one was killed. He was killed. Protecting this woman he'd never met before, wasn't a friend, didn't know who she was, just did it. This is one, as my friend Phil Trick used to say, and he may be watching now. Phil, if you are watching, good to see you. This is what my friend Phil Trick said. Well, this is where the cheese gets binding, because there were no documented cases of women throwing themselves on top of men to protect the men. Thank God. But if the feminists are right, then we should be seeing pretty much equal numbers of these things, right? 50-50. The women should be rushing towards the sound of gunfire, half of them, and half of the men should be running away. But it doesn't turn out that way. We saw this, the footage a couple nights ago, Natasha and I, and much has been made about this guy who was standing up and basically flipping the bird off to the guy who was doing the shooting, who's tried very hard to, his name never to mention. And while that actual act is very brief, looking at it from a different angle, everybody's down on the ground, and this one guy in his late 20s, early 30s or something gets up, stands up, throws his arms out like this, and basically is saying, hey, you want to shoot at somebody? Shoot me, you son of a bitch. And I remember thinking, oh, the raw courage of that. And I also remember thinking, yeah, I get the feeling that's what I would have done. It's certainly what I would have wanted to do. Natasha always tells me how happy she is that it doesn't look like, that I didn't join the military or get into combat situations, because she thinks I'd always be rushing out there first to, try and drag somebody back or something and just end up paying for that. But both of those acts I admire enormously, enormously. I'm not saying they weren't going to assist Sarge, and by the way, it's an excellent point, there were some women running to assist. I'm saying covering somebody with your body to prevent them from being shot. That's a somewhat different story, I think. Anyway, I admire both of those acts enormously. I think these people are heroes, and for different reasons. Needless to say, the guy who's still nameless, who saved this woman's life, who he'd never met, at the cost of his own. That guy there needs to be a statue at that place with his picture on it. It needs to never go away. As far as the guy that stood up and flipped this guy the bird and basically stood there and became a target, it certainly looked to me that he was trying to draw this guy's fire. That's what it looked like to me. That guy, there needs to be a statue of him right there too, with his arms outstretched and his middle finger extended up at this biped who was pouring all this death and destruction down on them. It's just, nobody knows whether they're going to, nobody knows whether they're going to step up like that, or people who, endless times, you hear people who always consider themselves brave when the things really start happening, they're cowering in a corner, and people who were just very ordinary just suddenly find themselves out there doing heroic things. And it's interesting. We did our right angle, Steve's right angle this week was on some of the reactions on Twitter within hours of the shooting. Basically, attorney for CBS and a teacher both said essentially the same thing. Oh, I have no sympathy for them. They're Republicans. They support gun rights. So no tears for me from them. And I just thought, these people are reptiles. And the reason that I know that they're reptiles, as I said on the show, is because I make a living making political points, and I am not fond of the progressives. I think they do incredible damage. And for these people to say, well, I'm glad it happened. They were Republicans. They were asking for it. What makes me realize that I and most of you are just better people than them is when I heard about the incident in Charlotte where a Nazi, or at least somebody who was a sympathetic, there were Nazis at the rally, ran down a group of Black Lives Matter counter-protesters. And I remember hearing that story, and I didn't go, oh, good for you. I hope the Nazi kills as many as possible. My thought was, who got hurt? How badly? Let's get them help, and whoever did this needs to go to jail, charged with first-degree murder, and if they prove that he was intending to do it, then he needs to get the death penalty. I wasn't on the side of the guy who was killing the progressives. I was on the side of the victims, because this is just politics. It's not my religion. It's not my identity. Some of these people are just horrendous, horrendous people. And the point I try to make on the show as far as that is concerned is that the CBS high-level lawyer and vice president and the teacher speak that way because they always speak that way. They just basically tweeted those things out because that's how they talk every day. They talk like this every day in Hollywood studios. These Republicans, I wish somebody would just take them all out. That's what they talk about all the time. I know it's true because I heard it. And you can't tell me that attitude doesn't get into our news, and you can't tell me that attitude doesn't get into the heads of the children that person taught or teaches. So, crazy. Anyway, it was certainly been several days of trying to get down to brass tacks on things. Okay, Ron.